The afternoon light spills across Forrester Creations as Katie Logan lingers near the design lounge, watching Dylan and Will together. To anyone else, it looks like the beginning of something real, well animated, lit up in a way Katie hasn't seen from him in months. But Katie isn't watching Will. She's watching Dylan. There's a beat, almost imperceptible, when Will turns away to answer his phone. Dylan's expression shifts. The warmth drains for just a second, replaced by something colder, more calculating, like an actor stepping out of character between takes. Katie catches it. She's seen that look before, in this family, in people who wanted something they weren't willing to ask for directly. She corners Dylan the moment Will steps out, and their conversation is brief, but loaded. Dylan denies everything smoothly, almost too smoothly, deflecting with just enough warmth to make Katie doubt herself, except for that flicker of hesitation before each answer, the half-second delay of someone choosing their words instead of speaking their heart. Katie doesn't let it go. That night, alone in her office, she starts digging, pulling old files, cross-referencing Dylan's background with the Forrester family archives. She doesn't know yet what she's looking for, only that something doesn't add up. A gap in Dylan's history. A connection to someone from Will's past that shouldn't exist. A name that keeps surfacing in places it shouldn't. Meanwhile, Dylan sits across from Will at dinner, laughing at his jokes, reaching for his hand, but her eyes drift, just once, toward the door, as if checking who might be watching. The affection looks real. Maybe it even is. But underneath it runs a current of purpose, a reason for being here that has nothing to do with romance. The episode closes on parallel images. Katie, alone, staring at a photograph she's just uncovered, one that connects Dylan to a secret the Forresters buried years ago. And Dylan, watching Will sleep beside her, her expression unreadable, torn between the mission that brought her here and the feelings she never expected to catch her off guard. The audience is left with a central question hanging in the air. Is Dylan falling for Will despite herself, or is she still playing a role? One that's about to shatter his heart the moment the truth comes out? The afternoon sun poured through the towering glass windows of Forrester Creations, casting long golden shadows across the design lounge. The familiar hum of the fashion house continued around them, phones ringing, assistants rushing between offices, designers discussing fabrics and sketches, but Katie Logan barely heard any of it. Her attention was fixed on two people, Will and Dylan. They stood together near one of the display tables, laughing over something that seemed completely ordinary. Will was animated, smiling in a way Katie hadn't seen from him in months. His shoulders were relaxed. His eyes were bright. For a moment, Katie felt relieved. Maybe this was exactly what Will needed. Maybe Dylan had brought something good into his life. But then Katie looked more carefully. She wasn't really watching Will. She was watching Dylan. There was something about the way Dylan looked at him. Something almost too perfect. The smile. The gentle touch on Will's arm. The way she leaned closer whenever he spoke. Everything about her suggested genuine affection. And yet, Katie couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching a performance. Then Will's phone rang. "Sorry," he said, glancing at the screen. "I have to take this." He stepped away, walking toward the opposite side of the lounge. Dylan watched him go. And for one brief second, the smile disappeared. It wasn't gradual. It didn't fade naturally. It simply vanished. Her expression became cold, focused, calculating. Katie froze. She had seen that look before. Not on Dylan specifically, but in this family. She had seen it on people who wanted something and weren't willing to admit what it was. People who smiled while they planned. People who could turn affection into a weapon. And then, just as quickly, Dylan's warmth returned. Katie narrowed her eyes. "Interesting." Will returned a moment later. "Everything okay?" "Of course," Dylan said, smiling. Katie watched them for another few seconds before making a decision. She waited until Will's phone rang again. "Take it," she told him. "I'll steal Dylan for a second." Will smiled. "Don't scare her away." "I'll try." Dylan laughed. But Katie didn't. She led Dylan toward a quieter hallway. The moment they were alone, Katie turned. "How long have you known Will?" Dylan blinked. "Excuse me? You heard me. I've known him for a while." That's not what I asked. Dylan gave her a small smile. You're protective of him. He's my son. I know. Then you should understand why I'm asking questions. Absolutely. Katie studied her. No defensiveness. No irritation. Just calm. Too calm. What do you want from Will? Dylan's smile disappeared. That's a strange question. Is it? Yes. Because from where I'm standing, this relationship moved very quickly. Sometimes people connect quickly. Sometimes. Dylan held her gaze. And sometimes mothers don't trust anyone who gets close to their children. Katie took a step closer. You've done your homework. About Will. About me. Dylan paused. Just for half a second. There it was again. That hesitation. Katie caught it. You know more about this family than you're admitting. Dylan laughed softly. You're imagining things. Am I? Yes. Another pause. Another carefully selected answer. Katie's instincts screamed at her. Be careful, Katie said quietly. If you're playing with my son, I will find out. Dylan's expression hardened for the briefest moment. Then the smile returned. I would never hurt Will. Katie looked into her eyes. That's not the same thing as saying you're being honest with him. Dylan didn't answer. And that silence told Katie more than any words could have. That night, Forrester Creations was almost completely empty. The offices that had been filled with noise only hours earlier were dark and silent. But one light remained on. Katie sat alone in her office. A stack of old files covered her desk. She had started with something simple. Dylan's background, employment history, previous addresses, old business connections, names of people she had worked with. There should have been nothing unusual, but there was. A gap. Nearly 2 years of Dylan's history seemed to disappear. Katie leaned closer to the screen. Where were you? She pulled another file from the cabinet, then another. She opened an old Forrester archive. The name Dylan wasn't there. Not directly, but a name connected to Dylan was. Katie's heart skipped. She typed the name into another database. Nothing. She tried a different spelling. Still nothing. Then she found it. An old photograph. Katie stared at it. The photograph was more than a decade old. It showed several members of the Forrester family standing together at an event. Katie recognized most of them immediately, but there was someone else. A woman standing near the edge of the picture. Someone Katie didn't recognize. And beside her was a young girl. Katie zoomed in. Her breath caught. The girl looked remarkably like Dylan. That can't be. Katie pulled out an older file. She searched through the family records. Then she found a reference to the woman's name. A name that had been buried in an old dispute. A name that connected to an incident the Forresters had never discussed publicly. Katie stared at the screen. This isn't about Will. The realization came slowly. Dylan came here for something else. But what? And why Will? Katie reached for the photograph. Her fingers trembled slightly. There was another page attached to the file. Most of it had been blacked out, but one sentence remained visible. A sentence that made Katie's stomach drop. She read it twice, then a third time. Family debt to be settled. Katie leaned back in her chair. Suddenly, every interaction between Dylan and Will looked different. The first meeting, the sudden chemistry, the speed of their relationship, the way Dylan always seemed to know where Will would be, the way she asked questions about the Forrester family without appearing to ask them. Katie's eyes narrowed. Who are you? Across town, Dylan sat across from Will at dinner. If anyone had seen them, they would have thought they were watching a young couple completely in love. Will told a ridiculous story. Dylan laughed. No way. I swear. You expect me to believe that? I'm charming. People believe charming people. That's dangerous. Will reached across the table and took her hand. Dylan looked down at their fingers. For a moment, something genuine crossed her face. She smiled. I like this. Us. Yeah. Will squeezed her hand. So do I. Dylan looked into his eyes. And that was the problem. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to care. The plan had been simple. Get close to Will. Gain access. Learn what the Forresters had hidden. Find the person responsible. Make them pay. That was all. There had never been room for feelings. But Will wasn't behaving like someone who was supposed to be a target. He made her laugh. He trusted her. He looked at her as if she were exactly who she claimed to be. And every time he did, the mission became harder. Dylan smiled at something he said. Then her eyes moved toward the restaurant entrance. Just once. She checked the door. Will noticed. What are you looking for? Dylan looked back at him. Nothing. You're sure? Absolutely. She leaned across the table and kissed him. But after the kiss, her expression changed. Because someone was standing outside. Watching. Dylan recognized the silhouette. Her smile vanished. Later that night, Dylan and Will arrived home. Will was exhausted. He dropped onto the bed. Best dinner we've had. Dylan smiled. You say that every time. Because every time is better. She laughed. Will reached for her hand. Stay. I am staying. No. I mean. He looked at her. Stay with me. Something inside Dylan cracked. She sat beside him. I will. Will smiled and closed his eyes. Within minutes, he was asleep. Dylan remained awake. She watched him. The man she had approached as part of a plan. The man who had unknowingly walked straight into the middle of a secret that had existed long before he was born. Dylan reached out and gently moved a strand of hair away from his forehead. Her eyes softened. Then she whispered, I'm sorry. Will didn't hear her. Dylan slowly got out of bed. She walked toward the window and looked down at the city. Her reflection stared back at her. For the first time, she looked uncertain. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was an old photograph. The same photograph Katie had just discovered. Dylan stared at it. On the back was a handwritten message. She turned it over. The message was short. Finish what we started. Dylan closed her eyes. She had promised herself she would. She had spent years preparing for this. Years waiting. Years believing that revenge was the only thing that would finally make sense of everything that had happened. But now there was Will. And that changed everything. Dylan looked back at the bed. Will was still sleeping peacefully. He trusted her. Completely. She had never expected that to matter. But it did. More than she wanted to admit. The following morning, Katie arrived at Forrester Creations before almost everyone else. She carried the old photograph in her hand. Her mind raced. She needed answers. But she couldn't simply accuse Dylan. Not yet. She needed proof. And more importantly, she needed to understand what secret the Forresters had buried. Katie returned to the archive. She searched deeper. A company acquisition. An old lawsuit. A financial dispute. A woman who had disappeared from the Forrester family's orbit. Then she found a connection to Will. Katie stared at the document. No, the connection wasn't direct. But it was enough. Someone from Will's past had known Dylan's family. Someone had been involved in the events that had destroyed Dylan's life. And that person had been protected by the Forresters. Katie's hands tightened around the file. Will has no idea. That was the most frightening part. Will had been pulled into a war that began before he even understood what was happening. And Dylan had put herself directly in the middle of it. Later, Katie found Dylan alone in the design lounge. Dylan looked up. Katie, we need to talk. Dylan immediately knew something was wrong. About what? Katie placed the photograph on the table. Dylan looked at it. Her face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Katie saw it. You recognize her. Dylan said nothing. You know this woman. Still nothing. Who is she? Dylan swallowed. Where did you get that? Katie's eyes hardened. So you do know her. Dylan looked away. You shouldn't have found that. Why? Because some things are better left buried. Not when my son is involved. Dylan looked at her. Will isn't the problem. Then what is? Dylan's eyes filled with something Katie couldn't identify. Regret. Fear. Maybe even shame. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. I can't. Can't. I won't. Katie stared at her. Are you using him? Dylan's silence was devastating. Katie stepped closer. Answer me. Dylan finally whispered. It started that way. Katie's face fell. What does that mean? Dylan closed her eyes. It means I came here with a purpose. To get close to Will? Yes. The admission hung between them. Katie looked as though she had been struck. Does he know?
No.
Does he know anything?
No.
Does he know who you really are? Dylan shook her head. Katie's anger rose. Then stay away from my son. Dylan looked at her. I can't.
Why?
Because it's too late. Katie frowned. What does that mean? Dylan's voice broke. I'm in love with him. Katie wasn't prepared for that answer. Neither was Dylan. For the first time, she had said it aloud. And saying it made the truth impossible to escape. She really did love Will. But that didn't erase what she had done. That evening, Will waited for Dylan outside Forrester Creations. When he saw her, he smiled. There you are. Dylan stopped. For a moment, she couldn't move. Will walked toward her. Everything okay? Dylan forced a smile.
Yeah.
You don't look okay. I'm just tired. Will reached for her hand. Dylan looked down. She wanted to pull away. Instead, she held on tighter. I need to tell you something. Will smiled. Tell me. Dylan opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Not yet. Because across the street, someone was watching them. Someone connected to the old secret. Someone who had just realized Katie was digging. The stranger lifted a phone. She knows. A pause. Then, we have a problem. That night, Katie sat alone in her office. The photograph lay in front of her. She had spent hours tracing the connection. Now she finally understood. Dylan wasn't simply an outsider. She was connected to a secret the Forrester family had buried years ago. A secret involving betrayal, money, and a devastating act that had changed multiple lives. But there was one question Katie still couldn't answer. Why Will? Why had Dylan chosen him? Katie looked at the photograph again. Then she noticed something she had missed earlier. A small marking on the corner.
A date.
Katie entered it into the archive. The system returned one result. Her face went pale. The date was the day Will had been born. Katie whispered, No. Dylan's connection to Will wasn't accidental. It had been planned long before they ever met. At the same time, Dylan stood beside Will's bed. He was asleep again. She watched him for a long moment. Then she sat beside him, her eyes filled with tears. She had come to Los Angeles believing she knew exactly what she wanted. Justice, revenge, answers. She had believed Will was simply the key that would unlock the door. But somewhere along the way, the key had become the person she couldn't bear to hurt. Dylan reached for his hand. I never meant for this to happen. Will shifted in his sleep. Dylan immediately wiped away a tear. She looked toward the bedroom door, then toward the photograph hidden inside her bag. The mission was still waiting. The truth was still waiting. And so was the revenge she had promised to deliver. But now there was something else. Love. And love had made everything infinitely more dangerous. The next morning, Katie returned to the office carrying the final file. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Katie stared at it. Then she understood the entire connection. Her eyes widened. This changes everything. She picked up her phone. Before she could make the call, the door opened. Dylan stood there. Katie slowly looked up. Neither woman spoke. They didn't need to. They both knew the secret was finally coming to the surface. Dylan's eyes moved to the file. Katie's hand tightened around it. How much does Will know? Katie asked. Nothing. And how much longer